Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, everybody? Just a quick update as today's video podcast is going to be inside. I wanted to do it out here. Use this little backdrop with the sun shining that way, and with all of, there's an example. I got trains going by. I have construction over there. Too many distractions that are around, even some police activity out in the river earlier, as you can see where I'm staying at. So I'm going to record the podcast indoors today. I would have loved to have been out here just to shoot one last time. Another remote podcast for me. Obviously the previous two were in Kissimmee, Florida, when I was visiting my son, Central Florida. But with it being my last full day today, and obviously I got a lot of work ahead of me, I just wanted to apprise everybody, for those watching, that yes, I wanted to do it out here and to do it in the elements, but it's just too many distractions, too much going on. So with that being said, let's get right to it. What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. My final full day in Florida, where it's been bright and sunny throughout, which is the same for the sports world, as I'll recap, review, and preview all that's going on, as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with your host, JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as this past Monday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And just a couple of things before I begin, not even just from a housekeeping standpoint, but number one, I'm currently sitting in a room, if you're watching on YouTube, where the acoustics aren't great. So if it's coming through echoey or not as clean as it should, my super apologies, and we all know it's all about the audio here. I know it's coming through loud and clear on my headphones, but for just the sake of post-production, I'll do my best to clean it up. But because I am not in a space that's familiar to me, and with the last two podcasts that I put out where I was outside, and for those who are watching on YouTube, I gave you a little preview as to where I wanted to shoot the podcast for today. But of course, with all the excitement outside, construction, there's also a train that is literally within eyeshot of where I'm sitting at currently. So in the background, for those listening on Apple, Spotify, JAYREELZ.com, etc., if you hear a train go by or a roar going by, that's what it is. And if you hear any construction in the background, you get a better idea as to why I didn't shoot outside, as opposed to me now doing this indoors. And even though with some high ceilings and just the acoustics, not necessarily great for recording a podcast, but I do appreciate your understanding, at least for this last time, because as I mentioned, heading back to New York tomorrow, I'll be in my quote-unquote home office recording from here on out as I put a lid on my Florida trip tomorrow morning. Also, as I've been stating here over the last few weeks, and I have the can right in front of me, OLIPOP. Yes, the soda brand, which is taking the nation by storm, maybe even the world for all I know. It is a prebiotic soda, good for your gut, as I've talked about here over the last couple of weeks. Not only that, it has tremendous amount of flavors, whether you love the classics, the root beers, the colas, the lemon limes. Those are the ones that I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with. But guess what? For the summer, the one I'm holding here, if you're watching on YouTube, watermelon lime. Think about that. Here it is summertime and you want to have a different taste or just a refreshing reminder of what the season brings. Well, watermelon lime. They also have banana cream, my favorite tropical punch. Where can you go wrong when it comes to trying a new soda that has no high fructose corn syrup? It's vegan, paleo, much better for you, only 4 grams of sugar per serving. And even more importantly, if you go to drinkolipop.com, that's DRINKOLIPOP.com. And when you get to checkout, you could use the promo code JAYREELZ to get 15% off of your order, 15 that is. So please, get them by the case, 2 cases, a dozen. Send them to your family, friends, foes, frenemies. Please do so, as yours truly will get a kickback from that. So once again, drinkolipop.com. I'll plug it up again at the end of the podcast. There you go, watermelon lime, as I would sincerely appreciate your support with that endeavor. Now let's get right to it, because there is a lot happening as we are now into the final days of July. Yes, August is a week from today. So the sports world is starting to heat up a little bit now with NFL training camp. We'll get into that a little bit later on. We know the Olympics, we're on the eve of that, where in Paris, France, we'll have all the pomp and circumstance with the ceremony and everything that the Olympics has to offer. So I'll touch on a couple of things there. But I have to start off with what has happened over the last couple of days, in particular in New York. And I know people are going to say, oh boy, here goes JAYREELZ. He's going to get on that soapbox and he's going to rail against the Yankees, so on and so forth. Not this guy. But I will say this. I am absolutely beyond shocked. I can't even express the words that I'm about to even emote when it comes to not only just the last 2 days, but with the season series between the Mets and Yankees, the 2 games last month at Citi Field and then the 2 games that just concluded in the Bronx. The only thing I have to say is that if George Steinbrenner was alive, he probably would have traded half the team and maybe even fired Aaron Boone in the process. That's number one. Number two, the Mets didn't just beat up the Yankees. And the Mets, I can't even believe I'm going to say this, the Mets embarrassed the Yankees in the 4 games. I understand the game Tuesday night was close, 3-2. That at-bat with Aaron Judge after Jake Diekman the night before when you had Edwin Diaz close out the game. And boy, that was hairy to say the least, because I was actually in the building. I was in Marlins Park there Monday night where the Mets had a 6-4 lead. Actually, it was 6-3. Gave up a run. Bases loaded with Josh Bell at the plate and looking as if to just have a complete meltdown for the closer, for this team who are trying to at least just get a split out of that 4-game series. But with Diaz throwing a lot of stressful pitches and Diekman being the closer there on Tuesday night, where the pitching staff and Carlos Mendoza, the manager, avoided Aaron Judge all night. They just pitched around them. 4 base on balls throughout the course of the night, but with Soto on first and having to pitch to Judge, what happened? Call strike 3. You get Judge out of there, and then they wrapped up the game right after a 3-2 victory there on Tuesday night, where Jeff McNeil had the 2-run homer, which was the deciding factor of the game. And then last night, even after Gleyber Torres leads off the game with a home run, and he actually had a home run there on Tuesday night, so who knows if he's going to start to turn his season around. But for the Mets to answer back, Tyrone Taylor with a home run. The Mets had 5 home runs on the night, 2 by Francisco Lindor. It's the second time in 3 games he's had a multi-homer game. On Monday night at Marlins Park, he had 2 home runs in that game. And for Lindor, who's heating up and even talks about an MVP in the National League, pump the brakes there. I don't know if I'm even ready to go there with that. But with the 5 home run output last night, and the Mets, who had a 6-2 lead there in the 8th inning, and they pulled away with Vientos hitting a home run, and then the capper was a 3-run homer by Lindor. Mets go away 12-3, and all I could say is, wow. I would have never thought in a million years, and even yesterday when I posted on the YouTube channel, is a little short when I said, could the Mets absolutely, positively, shockingly sweep the Yankees in a season series for the first time since 2013? And mind you, that was more of a clean sweep because whenever the teams had that 4-game stretch, it wasn't 2-2. It wasn't the 2 games one month and the 2 games the next month in a different stadium. That 4-game sweep in 2013 was in succession from Memorial Day Monday right through that Thursday, where the first 2 games were at Citi Field and then the other 2 games at Yankee Stadium. So that was a sweep right there in the same week, where obviously you had the sweep over the course of the past 2 months. And it kind of makes you think and wonder where both teams are headed right now. And they're going into very highly important series this weekend. I'll start with the Mets. The Mets have the Braves coming in for 4 games, and the Braves are reeling. Braves have not played well. They've actually lost 4 in a row. They had a couple of games postponed with the Reds due to weather, but they lost 2 games there. They lost the 2 games in St. Louis, and now they come into Citi Field with an interesting matchup tonight. Chris Sale going up against Luis Severino, and I know there's a lot of talk about Severino with the former teammates talking about how they only have 2 hitters and the Yankees didn't really want to respond. And thankfully, the Mets got out with the 2 wins and smiling as they went over the Triborough Bridge back to Queens to get set for a monumental 4-game series against the Braves. And we all know the Mets have had their troubles against Atlanta over the years. But this is a huge series for them because they are now 1.5 games back, 2 in the loss to the Braves for second place, and more importantly, first place in the wild card. And I even said this to one of my friends yesterday, James Douglas, I'll give him a shout out, where I said, would you take a sweep over the Yankees, but then lose 3 out of 4 to the Braves, or even a split? Now, of course, you'd want to take a split where no harm, no foul. But now you have to wonder whether or not the Mets are going to be able to try to get 2 games in this series. And if they do get 3 out of 4 and pick up 2 games, by the time we get to Monday's podcast, they will be 4th place in the standings when it comes to the playoff picture and first in the wild card. Could it happen? Is it a possibility? Well, the way they're playing and the way the offense has just been clicking, why not? And the Braves have been reeling. Who knows if the Braves, all of a sudden, they'll see the blue and orange of the Mets, even though they have to play these games on the road, but maybe they'll look at them and say, oh, wait, this is the Mets. Now this is going to be the medicine that we need in order for us to heal and get better and separate themselves from the Mets in the division. So I think it's going to be a fascinating series. Hopefully the ballpark will be jammed. It will be sold out throughout the course of the weekend. I know the weather's going to be beautiful. I know tonight may be a little bit sketchy, and even though I'm in Miami right now, but just following the weather there in New York, and I know it's been cloudy the last 2 days as they got both of those games in at Yankee Stadium, but going to be interesting to see how that series unfolds, as that's like I said, a bigger series for the Mets than it is for the Braves, because even with the Braves being injured, no Ozzie Albies, we know about Acuna and Spencer Strider, etc., but the Braves, we figure and think big picture, they're going to be okay. Mets, on the other hand, this is their time to really make some hay and try to get themselves in position to where they could be in the mix from now to the end of the year as a team that could threaten the 4th place and the top wild card, which means that they will get home field if that was the case. So something to keep in mind there. I don't know how it's going to shake down. I would hope minimum split. Now, would I settle for that? No, I'd want 3 out of 4, but I hope it doesn't go the other way around when they lose 3 out of 4 and they'll lose 2 games in the standings. So we'll wait and see what's going to happen there. And then the flip side of that with the Yankees, and I tell you, I know Aaron Boone is just trying to paint this picture rosy as possible, saying that it's all in front of us, that yes, it's a tough little stretch, but we're still this, we're still that. And even though he was a little bit honest in his postgame, and everybody knows that Boone, to me, just breaks out the pom-poms too much for his players and his team. There's not a lot of honesty, not too much transparency, and I get it, he's not going to throw his players under the bus, but at the same time, I almost feel as if he's just too wrapped up in the guys in the locker room as opposed to trying to call them out or even single them out to the degree where the team would maybe even, I get it, in this day and age, they could probably revert and then want Boone out, because as a manager, you have to coddle these players. You got to make sure that all the conditions are perfectly fine, whether it's in the locker room or in the batting cage. I get all that. But still, you're managing this team. And they have certainly regressed big time from that 49-21 start. Since then, they're 11-23. So 11-22, I should say. Oh, no, it is 23 because they are now, 60? I got to pull up their record again. But they're certainly have been one of the worst teams in baseball since June 15th. Only the White Sox are worse. And if you're in the same sentence with the White Sox right about now, that is certainly not a good sign. But now the Yankees go to Fenway this weekend to play the Red Sox. It seems like they play them every other weekend. So now you're going to have a chance where the Red Sox, who are within striking distance of the Yankees in the AL East, and as a matter of fact, let me pull that up, I believe they're 2 games back. And as we know, they've already beaten them 4 out of 6 here over the course of their first 2 series this year, with another series at Yankee Stadium to conclude their season series. But if I'm the Yankees right now, and with the way things have shaked down, and I get it that they won 9-1 on Monday against the Tampa Bay Rays as they split that series. They also had a 4-game series after winning the opener, and then they lost the middle 2. But for the Yankees here, they have to find themselves quick, because could you imagine with the Red Sox, who are currently 3 in the loss, but 4.5 back. But it's a little deceiving because the Yankees have already played 104 games and they're 60-44, where the Red Sox have played 101. So there's a 3-game in hand advantage to the Red Sox. So I understand if you're the Yankees, if you win 2 out of 3, you'll gain a game and have a little breathing room with the Red Sox. But let's just say if the Red Sox do pick up a game, that means they'll be just 2 back in the loss, and dare I even say sweep, they'll be even in the loss column and would make matters even worse for the Yankees. Now, no Garrett Cole, as he got pounded last night, so he's not going to pitch this weekend for the Bombers. In fact, you're going to have Nestor Cortez, who has been awful this year. I believe he's going to toe the rubber there tomorrow night in Fenway. So the Yankees, they got to get this thing fixed quick, fast, and in a hurry. And with the trade deadline on Tuesday, who knows? You may have a lot of trades that could be consummated here over the next few days before we even get to Monday's podcast. So I'm going to be interested to see what Brian Cashman's going to do. I'm sure he's got to be furious. That bullpen has been springing leaks. I understand they were great at the start of the year, but we know over time they're going to show their warts and all. And I'm sure they're going to have a good stretch here, you would think, as we get into August and September before gearing it up for October. But the Yankee team, they right now are on fumes. And I would think, knowing that their bitter rivals up in Beantown are going to be waiting for them, I would think that they're going to try to do their best to win a series here because, again, even though they won that series in Baltimore right before the break, but since that tremendous start where they were 49-21, they've only won one series since then. I believe they're 1-8-2 over the course of a month and change. So will the Yankees turn it around here in Boston? We shall see. Bottom line is that I would think they would, but again, if they haven't played well over the stretch, unless the Red Sox pitching is just in tatters, but I would think they're going to be ready, geared up, and primed for a big series, knowing that they're nipping on the Yankees' heels, and if they win a couple of games, they'll be one game closer there in the wild card standings. Now, let me get to some other things here as far as baseball goes. The Orioles, you would think there would have been some separation here, considering the Mets did them a favor, beating them the 2 games, as I mentioned, but with the Orioles about to conclude their series, I would say in about an hour and 20 minutes, literally 2 miles from where I'm sitting at against the Miami Marlins, and all the Marlins have done has beaten them here over the first 2 games by the score of 6-3. And if you're the Orioles, I don't know, maybe the South Beach life was great. Maybe they've just been hanging out in Brickell, or maybe they took the trip over the MacArthur Causeway to go into South Beach, and maybe they've had a couple of long nights. Well, the turnaround from last night to today, because they got a 12-10 game, first pitch where getaway game, getting out of Dodge, and who knows, I'm sure they went back to their rooms and thought, we got to get a game out of here, considering that the Yankees have also been tripping over their own cleats. So let's see if the Orioles could get back in the win column, as they struggled here right out of the gate from the break. Now, I understand they won 2 out of 3 in Texas, but for them to show up in Miami and pretty much be a no-show, that was a shock. Other things in baseball, give it up for the Texas Rangers, because now they've inched closer in that wild and crazy AL West. And I talked about this on Monday because Seattle, as I said then, and I'll just touch on it for about 10 seconds now, their offense is from hunger. They got swept by the Anaheim Angels, and they actually lost 6 in a row to them, dating back to before the All-Star break. And they've scored 1 run in each of the 3 games that they lost. And with Houston playing well, and they have a game ahead of them in the standings, the Astros 1 game over the Mariners, but with the Rangers playing well and have an absolute chance to sweep the White Sox, who have lost the first 3 games, a 4-game set there in Texas. So it looks like they could even inch closer to the Mariners in the division, because right now the Rangers are 1 in the loss, although 2 back, as they're in the division where the Mariners are 1 game behind the Astros. So it looks like if the Rangers win today, and I don't know if Seattle's playing, although I'll pull up the schedule to see what today and obviously the weekend will look like in a moment. But Seattle, as I mentioned, have not played well. A team that you have to wonder whether or not they're going to make some trades. They need offense in the worst way. And here they are now, 2 in a loss behind Houston, and now the Rangers, who were as far as 5 back right around the break, they are now currently 1 or 2 games under 500 and 1 in the loss behind the Mariners. So who knows? Is it time for the Rangers to now take off? We shall wait and see. So that's going to be interesting there. Obviously, talked about the Braves, the Pirates with Paul Skeens. He got his first loss there the other day against the Cardinals. But for that matchup and for what's gone on there, I believe that's just a 3-game series. The Pirates did lose 2 out of 3. They did win the middle game. And now they're going to host the Nationals, or I should say the Cardinals will host the Nationals, not the Pirates. But the Pirates, who have, although lost 2 out of 3, but still in the wild card mix there in the National League, and I'll break that down in a moment. those are some of the big things there that I've seen here in baseball over the last couple of days. Then I understand you also had the Bobby Witt situation, Arizona playing Kansas City, where he got the hard part out of the cycle, double, triple, and home run. All he needed was a single. He gets drilled, and then Torey Lovullo gets ejected because he said, why would I drill this guy here? Certainly was not a good optic there for Arizona to try to get at Bobby Witt. It's not as if they play all the time or if it's a division rival scenario. Certainly not the case. But that was certainly uncalled for, and I forgot who the Arizona pitcher was that threw at Bobby Witt. But for the Royals, who have played well here, as we know, hanging around now, I wouldn't say hanging around, but certainly a team that looks like they're going to do their best to get to October. So for them, let's see where they fall. And I believe Arizona did win 2 out of 3, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see real quick. Actually, Arizona did win 2 out of 3, so good for them as Arizona continues to be part of that muddled NL wildcard mix. And then you also had a scenario where Alex Cora got a 3-year extension. Speaking of the Red Sox, I should have mentioned that earlier when we were talking about the Yankee-Red Sox series. Roughly $22 million. A little bit of a surprise considering that Craig Counsell got $8 million, 5 for 40 with the Brewers. You would have thought that he would have gotten somewhere in the 8.5, maybe even $9 million, but I guess he figured that, hey, I'm staying put. Maybe even a lot of rumors that him going to another team next year, considering this could have been his last year in Boston. Obviously, that's not going to be the case. So that's what we have there. And I know I didn't mention about Christian Scott. Well, thankfully, the Met young rookie right-hander who was diagnosed with a UCL sprain, but it didn't look like there was any structural damages or any tears for that matter. So it's just going to be a lot of rest and rehab for him. They may even strike him up here at some point or ratchet up his training where he's going to get some rest now. But if Scott could get back in rotation, that could certainly be a boon for a Met rotation that certainly needs it. And it's amazing how this pitching staff has put it together, because this is not a pitching staff that if you're a manager of a team, you're going to go in there shaking in your boots. This isn't Matt Harvey, Noah Syndergaard, Jacob deGrom. By any stretch it is. So kudos to what they've done there as far as keeping it together, and let's see how they do against the Braves this coming week. Now, or weekend. Now, as far as the schedule for today and obviously into what is going to be a fascinating weekend for the 2 series that I mentioned for the New York teams, you don't have any 4-game series wrap up with the aforementioned, I know Chicago, Texas, but you don't have St. Louis and Pittsburgh. We talked about Baltimore and Miami. Corbin Burns is pitching today, so if there's one guy that could certainly stop the bleeding here, it's him. So we'll keep an eye on that. As far as the series over the weekend, Cleveland and Philadelphia, fascinating series there with the 2 teams that are at the top of their respective divisions. Cincinnati at Tampa, San Diego at Baltimore, return for Manny Machado, which he already made his return back to Baltimore a couple of years ago, but considering I'm sure he's going to get a nice standing ovation for him. Texas at Toronto, I know Toronto is out to sea. LA at Houston, a little 2017 World Series rematch. We've seen those 2, of course, play since then, but the Dodgers will invade H-Town this weekend. Then you have Seattle going to Chicago to play the White Sox. So who knows? If they can't get better, even if they lose today against the Rangers, that is the White Sox. So I should say, even if Seattle, got my teams all mixed up here. My apologies. If Seattle can't go into Chicago and win 2 out of 3 minimum, then who knows? Their season could be up in smoke before you know it. Other than that, that's it. Pittsburgh and Arizona, that's an interesting series with 2 teams battling it out for the wild card, and that's pretty much what we have there as far as matchups and series. You got a bunch of good series this weekend. Atlanta, New York at Boston, Cleveland and Philadelphia, San Diego, Baltimore, and San Diego's played well here. They've won 4 in a row. LA at Houston, Pittsburgh at Arizona. So you have some very good series to keep an eye on here as we get into the final week of July. Now, let me turn my attention. Where should I go here? What the hell? Helmet and shoulder pads, NFL, as we have a lot cooking there. All the training camps, everybody has reported at this point, except for a few players. And maybe I'll start there before I even talk about this 18-game season nonsense, which was reported a couple of days ago. But you have a lot of players that are holding out here. And one that was a little bit disgruntled, and a one Najee Harris, the running back for the Steelers, although he's reported he's ready to go, but considering that the Steelers did not pick up the fifth-year option for him, and because of the running back nature of how they get paid, unlike the quarterback, of course, or the wide receiver, the left tackle, the corner, the pass rusher, etc. But for guys like Trent Williams, and we've seen this movie before, he's going to hold out for a bigger deal. No surprise there. Arguably the best left tackle in the game. You also have a scenario with the Jets, Hasan Reddick, who they got from the Eagles. He's also holding out for a bigger deal as well, as he's in the last year of his contract. And then you have Jordan Love, which I found a little intriguing from this standpoint. Now, last year was his first full year. And mind you, as we all know, he backed up Aaron Rodgers for what, 2-3 years prior to that? So I get it that he's going into a final year of his contract. So he figures, hey, I'm not going to practice or play in any preseason games until I get a deal. And even the GM, Brian Gutekunst, he even agreed to that. He said, hey, he can understand why. It's not as if there's a guy who has already played 2 years and he's asking for a big-time deal or anything like that. But here's the fascinating thing about it. Yes, he had one good year, took his team to the playoffs, had a resounding playoff win in Dallas before falling short in San Francisco, where he had a terrible fourth quarter. But for Love, who, listen, we know what the market is. We understand he's going to get a boatload of money, but it's just a matter of how much. And the reason why I say that is because we've seen here over the last couple of years, the Lamar Jacksons, the Justin Herberts, the Joe Burrows, etc., get anywhere near $100 and some odd million of dollars as far as guaranteed money. Where does Jordan Love deserve that? Right now, considering he only has 1 year under his belt, is he going to get a 5 for $265 and get $180 million guaranteed? I don't think so. If anything, I would say let's look at a 4-year deal, maybe in the vicinity of almost $200 million, and you get $100 million guaranteed, which is nothing to sneeze at by any stretch, because he's still a young player. This is going to be his first big payday, and I would think let's see what he does over those 4 years, to where if he starts to move up the chain as far as the top quarterbacks in the sport, then by the time you get to, and I don't even know how old he is off the top of my head, he's got to be at least 25. So if you get to 29 and you've made a couple of Pro Bowls, and dare I even say maybe get a first or second team All-Pro nod in the NFL, then you could go ahead and get that 5-year deal worth, at that point, it'd probably be in upwards of $300 million, where you'll get $60 million a year. Are the Packers going to push all their chips to the middle of the table, considering only one good year from Jordan Love? Bit risky, if you ask me. One more time, we understand that this is what the market is. These quarterbacks are going to get anywhere between $50 and $60 million, with $150, $175, maybe even $200 million guaranteed. Understood. But Jordan Love, at this juncture of his career, is he going to get that money right now? I'd be a little surprised. So I'm sure there's going to be some inner workings there, whether or not, whether it's the years, whether it's the money, the guaranteed money, he's going to get paid. We all know that, but it's just how much he's going to get paid, because he does not deserve to be paid amongst the likes of Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and the aforementioned Burrow, Herbert, Lamar Jackson, players like that. So we'll certainly keep an eye on that as we move it along here throughout training camp. And then you've had a couple of retirements where Michael Gallup, the former Cowboy and was with the Raiders, decided to hang it up, I believe 28 years of age. Good for him as he moves on to the next stage of his career, or his life, I should say. And then Brandon Graham, the longtime Eagle linebacker, upcoming year, number 15 in the National Football League, will retire after this year. And the guy's been a warrior, will certainly be in their Ring of Honor, maybe even their jersey retirement, etc. So he's also going to call it a career. And do I even unpack the report about Kyle Shanahan offering Bill Belichick a job with the Niners? I mean, what was that about? And of course, Belichick declined. I'm sure he didn't want it to be a thing where, although working under a guy like Shanahan, as we all know, the offensive mastermind that he is, and imagine having the defensive prowess of Bill Belichick as your defensive coordinator, maybe even assistant head coach for that matter. But Belichick declined, I'm sure, was flattered, etc. But maybe Belichick wants to get that head coaching job, knowing that he's maybe too small to get the defensive coordinator job, even if it is for a Niner team that certainly has aspirations for getting back to a Super Bowl. And then we had this talk earlier this week where, no surprise that the NFL wants to go to an 18-game schedule. This has been talked about here for a couple of years, I would think. Even when the season, or when they upgraded the season to 17 games, this will be the fourth year now that the NFL will have a 17-game season. And as everybody knows, I don't like the 17-game season. And for more on that, check my vlog on YouTube. 7 reasons why I'm down on the NFL. But for this particular instance, to go 18 games, and I get it, they're going to round it off and have the season extended for another week where you're going to have the President's Weekend, a holiday weekend where if you have the Super Bowl the day before the President's Weekend, it's having a holiday, the day off the next day for a majority of people. And yes, that does sound smart, but when will it get to a point where the NFL is going to look at maybe somewhere down the road, as successful as that is, and I'm sure that they would put a lid on it there right before President's holiday. But what makes you think they won't go to a 20-game season where they'll cut the preseason games to 2, and they may do that if they do go to an 18-game season, but because they went 17 3 years ago, and now they may go 18 in the next 3 years, what makes us think that they may not go to 20 when it's all said and done to go into March, to even interrupt the college basketball season and have their own quote-unquote March Madness to where the Super Bowl will be held that first Sunday in March? Now, I understand this is just me over-exaggerating or me just thinking worst-case scenario, but the NFL are pigs. If they're looking at the almighty dollar, which is just unfathomable, because to me, they've already hit their ceiling. They can't get any better. They can't go any further. They're at a point where their sport is king, as we all know. We get it. Bow down to the NFL. Bow down to the gambling aspect, to the fantasy football aspect, to games pretty much every night of the week. Doesn't matter what day it is, other than Tuesday, because you got Wednesday this year on Christmas. We got the Thursday night games, as we know. We got the Friday, Black Friday, after Thanksgiving, and the opener for the Eagles in Sao Paulo on a Friday. We got Saturday games in the latter part of December. Obviously, we got Sunday and we got Monday. Listen, why not put a game on Tuesday at 10 in the morning? People will call out from work to watch that game and to check their fantasy scores. We get it. The NFL has everything on lockdown. But guess what? They're always going to look for bigger and better. So would it surprise you? And keep this receipt. July 25th, 2024, that's somewhere down the road after they have an 18-game season, and it may be 2035, that the NFL could decide, you know what? Let's have a 20-game season, kind of round it out to where we have 10 home games, 10 road games, more revenue coming into those stadiums, to those teams, to those owners, etc. And then the games will end sometime Easter Sunday in April. Would it shock you, people? Really? That's where we're at with the NFL. Like I mentioned, they're just a bunch of pigs. They just want to continue to just wallow in it. They have money that their great-grandkids, grandkids couldn't even spend. And all they want to do is just keep stacking chips. And I get it. People are going to say, well, hey, they're in the business to do so. Why not? But again, greed. That's what rules the NFL when it comes to not only just with the money, but just streaming platforms and games every night of the week. They're destroying their own product and they don't even know it. But for someone like myself who cherished these Sunday 1 o'clock games, and all right, you got your Sunday night, Monday night, all right, you want to throw in Thursday, but now you got games every day of the week, and oh, what time is this game on, or what streaming platform? Is it Netflix? Is it Amazon Prime? Is it Peacock? Is it this? Is it on the Cooking Channel? Is it on Nickelodeon, where tied in with CBS and Paramount, they're going to put their games on there with Nate Burleson? When does it stop? When does it stop? Let me move on from there. I'm going to go to what is happening with the association as I lace up my high tops. And it's a two-pronged attack because it's also going to tie in, well, I'll save that for the Olympics. And this is going to be quick here, people, because the new media deal is now official with the NBA, and give it up to WNBA too as well. I'll get to them in a second. But for the NBA now going into next year, you're going to have TNT and ESPN, ABC, the usual networks, but the following season, you still will have ESPN, ABC, you're going to have NBC, and you're going to have Amazon Prime. Those are the channels, networks, streaming platforms that are going to air NBA basketball. And for TNT, the Warner Brothers Time Media or Time Warner, how they look at it here is that, wait a minute, we're still in negotiations here. That even though it may be reported that we're on the outside looking in, but they feel that they've been swindled by the NBA to the point where they've matched Amazon's offer, and I don't even have the dollar amount in front of me, but they've matched it to the point where they feel like TNT should still be broadcasting games after the 2024-2025 season. So we don't know what's going to happen here. If it's already official, can TNT sneak in through the back door? Is there still time to lobby or even to negotiate to see whether or not that TNT can still be a part of this NBA package? Based on what I read, I think it's already signed, sealed, and delivered. So who knows if there's going to be any further negotiations that are going to take place. Right now, it looks like TNT, that is it for Inside the NBA after next year. No more Ernie, Shaq, Charles, and Kenny. Who knows? Stranger things can happen. 11th hour, I don't know. But right now, it looks like there is going to be no TNT after this coming season. So enjoy it once the NBA season begins there in the middle to latter part of October. But that's just, I don't even want to say it's a tough break. I don't know. Obviously, I'm not in the room with these people, with the bigwigs to hash out or even iron out any of these details. But I'm sure there'll be some news down the road whether or not TNT will find their way in. But right now, it doesn't look like that's the case. And TNT is saying, we got screwed here. So who knows what's going to happen there. And then the WNBA, they connected with a big-time media rights deal themselves. 11 years, it could go up to $3 billion. Now, this is all dependent on future agreements with additional partners and things of that nature. But for them to get a deal, 11 years, roughly $2.2 billion, where each team will get about $200 million, that is a boon. And we've seen what has happened here, and I get it. I'll be the first one, raise my hand high in the air. I have not talked a lot of WNBA. I know it's been all the rage, and congratulations and fantastic. I haven't really invested in that. I know I should probably even start to pick up now. I know they had their All-Star break this past weekend in Phoenix, and I know that was just a big-time success. And the MVP got a big-time performance there, the most points scored. And even the skills competition was huge there with the three-point and things of that nature. So the WNBA is flying here. And congratulations and kudos to them. I'm not going to say I purposely left myself out, but obviously I have not fully invested and gone all in prior to the season to say, you know what, let me start paying attention here and really following what's going on. And I get it that, am I going to be late on this bandwagon if I start today or as I inch closer to the playoffs to maybe even start talking WNBA playoffs? Maybe it is for this season, but for sure, I'm probably going to have to keep that on my radar because I feel like now, am I going to jump on the bandwagon just because of what's happened and what's transpired here over the past year, the whole Caitlin Clark phenomenon, Angel Reese, the great players that have been in the league for many years. The league has been up and running for what now, 25, 26, even maybe 27 years at this point. And yes, for those who are wondering, JAYREELZ, come on, man, you got to get on the boat. All right, I may not get on the boat this year, or maybe I'll talk about certain things depending on how it shapes up here from now to the end of the season and into the playoffs, which I know begins around September, and that's right at the height of the football season. But yours truly has it duly noted, and I'm going to have to really roll up my sleeves and get into it. Maybe not so much the rest of this year, unless there's going to be just so much intrigue and maybe even some drama heading into what will be a very interesting postseason. And yes, maybe I'll touch on things here and there, but I'm certainly not going to fake the funk, come on here like, yeah, I know every player on every roster and I've watched every game, or maybe not every game, but you know what I'm saying, to come in as if I know the WNBA like the back of my hand. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to fool you people. I'm not going to do that, but I will have my antenna up just to see what's going on, read the tea leaves, and certainly take over from there as we get deeper into the season and maybe even into the playoffs where, dare I even say, could I even handicap it? All right, I'll pump the brakes on that at that point, but we'll wait and see. And you also had a couple of extensions. One with the coach, Tom Thibodeau, 3-year extension with the Knicks. Now, who knows? If they have a good year but lose in the first round, I wouldn't be surprised if Jay Wright gets a phone call from James Dolan. But I'm teasing there, but you never know with all the Villanova Knicks that are there, as we documented it earlier this summer. And then Andrew Nembhard, for a guy who came out of nowhere and performed well in the postseason, whether it was against the Knicks, I'm sure in the Indiana series as well, and even with the Celtics, played well, had the big shot there against the Knicks, as we all know, in Game 3, which certainly turned that whole series around. But for him to get a 3-year, $59 million extension, I tell you, kudos to him. And Nembhard, let's see if he can continue to piggyback off of the performance. Now, listen, is he a big-time offensive player? He is not, but he's resourceful. He's a guy that can score, but I don't know if he's a guy that you could truly rely on for him to score anywhere between 15, 17 points a game. He's going to be a guy that's going to be a glue guy, a lunch pail guy. Yes, he can get his threes every now and again. He's going to try to play solid defense. He's going to do those intangibles. But, yeah, as a guy that's going to be in the conversation when it comes to, let's say, Tyrese Halliburton or Pascal Siakam maybe being the third scorer on the team. If I pulled up his stats right now and told you what he averaged last year, you're going to be like, what? This guy got $59 million. He only averaged X point 2 points a game or whatever. You're going to say the same thing. But based on what he did in this postseason, and I'm sure they want to bank on him to continue to be a very good performer, not just from the offensive side, but also defensive, the 50-50 balls, etc. So I thought, hey, good signing for them just to keep their team intact, especially when they brought in Siakam via trade and they gave him the extension. We know about Miles Turner, Tyrese Halliburton, etc. So good for the Pacers as they try to keep up with the Joneses in the East with the Celtics, Sixers, Knicks, etc. Now I'm going to get to the Olympics, or maybe I'll save that for last. Quick NHL note, I have to throw this out there. Stan Bowman, the former GM of the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the sexual harassment case on the player Chris Beach back in the 2010s. Well, actually, it was 2010. He, Joe Quenneville, the coach, and another executive who were suspended from the league based on a lot of the just sordid details that came out of that time, now is back in the league, served his time, and the Edmonton Oilers hired him as a GM. So before people are going to get up in arms like, oh, how are you going to hire this guy back, whatever. Hey, listen, he was suspended. Unfortunately, that scenario, which I don't have all the details at this moment, but certainly were not pleasant to say the least. But for him to get suspended after, I believe it was after the 21 season, 2020, 2021. So he sat out 3 years and now has made his way back into the league with the Oilers, who are now hoping to get that guy, Bowman, who won 3 cups in Chicago, and try to be the architect to get the final pieces to their puzzle, maybe even the contract discussions with a one Leon Draisaitl to kind of shore that up, to make sure that they get him on the team to go along with Connor McDavid, etc., and bring in whatever other reinforcements, some cup champion experience or DNA to put this team over the top. As we all know, they went to a Game 7 of a cup final when they were down 0-3. So I thought that was a very good hire for them, because they do need a piece or two in order for them to get over the hump, for them to get that brass ring. And we know about the magical carpet ride that they had here throughout the spring and into the summer, just falling a couple of goals short of winning a Stanley Cup and really rewriting the history books in the process. So you have to wonder, now with Bowman on a team, what's going to happen for Joe Quenneville? Now the executive, I don't really know. Maybe, I'm sure he'll join a squad at some point. Who knows? Maybe he could even be a part of Bowman's staff there in Edmonton. But for Joe Quenneville, who's won those 3 Stanley Cups, highly respected coach throughout the sport, where does he end up? Now, the offseason has begun. Coaching changes have been made. I don't know if he's going to get a coaching job now. Maybe he gets a TV job just to kind of be visible out there. And if a coach gets fired midway through the next season, maybe he'll pick up the pieces and get signed there on a team that maybe has aspirations to have a long playoff run or even a Stanley Cup run in their own right. Who knows? But Quenneville, you got to wonder whether or not he's going to be a guy that, maybe not for this year, but certainly at some point next year and even the following year, as we get to this time next summer, whether or not he'll sign on the dotted line with the team and become a part of their staff to see whether or not he could take them to the promised land. So that's what happened with the NHL. No other players, signings. It's been very quiet, obviously, since the first week of July. But I had to bring that up with Stan Bowman, and especially with the checkered past and the involvement there with the Blackhawks and that scandal. And now he's back in the league there with Edmonton. Now let me wrap up with the Olympics, because tomorrow the curtain will raise in Paris where we'll have all the athletes, all the pomp and circumstance, Snoop Dogg bringing in the torch from somewhere there in Paris. And it is going to be one that we haven't seen in quite some time. Because remember, 3 years ago, I believe the games were in Tokyo, but because of COVID and the aftermath of that, I'm sure a lot of people really weren't wrapped up into the Olympics like that. But because Paris, you have obviously one of the great cities on the planet, and you could even argue maybe with New York, San Francisco, Rome, this is a city that I'm sure is going to welcome the world with open arms to know that they're going to host this event for the next 2.5 weeks. And I'm not going to break down events. I'm not going to break down races. We could talk about Simone Biles. We could talk about Sha'Carri Richardson. We could talk about all these until we're blue in the face. But obviously with the Olympics, and everybody knows, this isn't to knock or by any means denigrate the games overall, but I don't really follow it. And yes, I know who the big names are here in the U.S. I couldn't even tell you who are some of the even bigger names outside. Like, is there an Usain Bolt that is out there, not necessarily has to be Jamaica, but just any country for that matter, or a swimmer somewhere on the other side of the planet that we should keep an eye on, or a javelin thrower, or pole vaulter, or I don't even know. And I'm sure you guys and gals don't know either outside of the U.S. And if you do, God bless you. So that's why I don't look at the Olympics as one that, all right, I'm going to tune into and see what's going to happen. Will I watch some of the events, especially with the wife? I believe I will, especially when it comes to the gymnastics and maybe even the swimming. Absolutely, the track and field stuff, Sha'Carri Richardson, without question. Now, will I get into the basketball? And that's what I'm going to segue to, because the men's team, who's had a couple of scares here, whether it was against South Sudan or even Germany for that matter, I would think this team is going to be the favorite to win it all. I'd be shocked if they don't win it. Now, even if they do fall short, whether they get a silver or a bronze, would I scratch my head? I would have to say yes. But I'd be surprised, because everybody has built this team up, considering what has happened going back to the previous Olympics and knowing that they have a veteran-laden team. Good balance there with Drew Holiday and Bam Adebayo and even Derek White. When you look at it from a defensive standpoint, you have a big man who could defend and also rebound. We know about Drew Holiday as well as Derek White. But of course, you have your big-time stars. You got LeBron, you got KD, you got Steph, you got AD. We know who the guys are. Embiid, a former MVP. We know that this team is loaded. But you do have these regions that have played together for years. And this isn't just a super team that has been put together over the last 3 weeks, or I should say been practicing over the last 3 weeks or month or so. When you're talking about some of these national teams, these are guys that have been playing for quite some time. Now, that doesn't automatically mean that they're going to beat the U.S. team for that matter, and especially with the international rules, etc. But I don't think you're going to see Dream Team blowouts 83-40. I don't think you're going to see a lot of those. I could see a couple of blowouts along the way. I could see U.S. winning by 20, but I don't think this USA team, although I feel deep in my gut that they're a lock, but with what we've seen here just over the last week or so, I would still be surprised if they don't win it all. I would be. Because then at that point, with all these stars that they have here and the big names, etc., and I understand you just can't roll them out to the floor and the other team's just going to bow down and surrender. I understand. But if they do lose, what does USA Basketball do? Go back to the drawing board? I mean, seriously, this is the thing where this team's going to be highly scrutinized to see whether or not they're going to get to the gold medal game and win the whole thing before we get to, what is it? The finale is 2 weeks from this coming Sunday. And there's a lot of pressure on this team. I would think that as much as they're the favorite, and I couldn't even tell you what their odds are or whatever, but I'm sure if they don't come home with the gold, there's going to be a lot of criticism toward this team, and maybe even to the people who constructed this team, not necessarily the coaching staff with the one Steve Kerr, but maybe even Grant Hill, who overlooks and oversees the personnel when it comes to this USA team. So a lot of pressure for them. I think they're going to win. I know I said it, would I be shocked if they lose? I would be shocked, but then again, based on everything that I said, I guess I can't even look at it that way. But bottom line is that I'm just going to go ahead and say that U.S. to me, roster-wise, hands down, but we're going to have to see how they're going to play, especially once the pressure ratchets up to the point where if they can't even get out of, let's say, those opening couple of games alive where they're going to have to play for their lives in that third round, fourth round, etc. We'll have to wait and see on that. But another fascinating story coming out of the games is that your second round tennis, and I get it, tennis isn't really, and probably shouldn't be an Olympic sport, but you could have a clash in the second round between Novak Djokovic and Rafael Nadal. And we know Nadal's on the mend trying to come back. He just played at a tournament where he made it a final, not at Wimbledon, in another tournament, and I believe lost in that final. So who knows? Is he fully healthy, 100%, ready to go? I don't know what the surface is that they're going to play on there in Paris. Maybe it is clay because they may be even using Roland Garros for all I know. So maybe that's why. It's a scenario where he felt that, hey, if I'm going to participate, this is the year for me to do so because I'm the king of the clay court. And if that's the case, that could be a very fascinating matchup between the old guard there of Djokovic and Nadal. So I'll keep that on my radar to discuss if they do happen to match up there over the course of the first few days there at the Olympics. But other than that, I can't really delve into a lot of these other events or get into that because A, I don't really follow it, and B, just like I'm sure you guys and gals out there, you probably couldn't tell me who the top swimmer out of China or the top swimmer out of Belarus, and I think Belarus is part of this Olympiad. But yes, but that's my point. Could you tell me who out of New Zealand is their best track runner? Seriously. So that's what I got with the Olympics there. Let's see how this is all going to shape up over the course of the next 2.5 weeks. And yes, I'll sprinkle that in based on the attention and if there is any scandal or somebody wins, somebody loses, whatever. So I'll be sure to keep you abreast of everything that's happening there. And I believe that does it for another podcast. Let me just make sure here before I sign off. Yes, that will conclude another podcast as yours truly gets to pack up and head back home tomorrow, where the next time I'll be recording will be in the friendly confines of my home office. So, as always, thank you so much, everybody, for stopping by, passing by, carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the world of sports. If you haven't done so, please subscribe, rate, review, Apple, Spotify, you know the deal. Please do so. Tell your friends, family, frenemies, foes, etc. that yours truly, independent content creator that I am, just trying to make a name for myself and trying to also generate some income in the process. And of course, one more time, OLIPOP, people. There it is, right in front of you if you're watching on YouTube. OLIPOP. Go to drinkolipop.com and you can get a refreshing flavor like this. Watermelon lime. That's right, watermelon lime, that's a soda. Yes, good for your gut. Plant fiber, good for your microbiome. Not a lot of sugar and a lot of refreshing flavors. Whether it's the classics, orange, grape, root beer, cola, you name it. And then they also have banana cream. What? Peaches and cream. Another one that is just out of bounds, as well as tropical punch, which is my favorite. So go to drinkolipop.com. Use the promo code JAYREELZ at checkout. You get 15% off your order. If you could do so, people, I would greatly appreciate that. Thank you so much for those who have done so to this point. And if you haven't, please. And also, for those who have stayed this long to watch this podcast, I appreciate you. Also, go to my YouTube channel, at JAYREELZ, for content that I post up daily. And obviously, the podcast will be posted up there shortly, or already be posted by the time this recording is set. So we got that going on. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion, do so at the following. Obviously, on YouTube at JAYREELZ, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ Podcast, Twitter, X, JAYREELZ1, just the number, or the old-fashioned way, the JAYREELZ Podcast at gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. It's in the blood, it's in the DNA, as I like to say, talking sports since birth. Again, doing this on my own, a one-man band operation, as I try to, like I said, make a name for myself in this space, in this content creation universe that everybody's out there doing, but none other like yours truly when it comes to sports, talking about everything in 1 hour with nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury, with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ Podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx to South Beach to South Central to South Pacific and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ Podcast, on the flip, baby.